Hello, welcome back. I am here today with another meal prep video. This one is fall inspired. I don't know how many years it has been since I've said that I was going to make a meal prep that was inspired based on the season, and it just never happened. But this time around, I'm finally doing it, y'all. So right now, I am started off with the breakfast of this week's meal. I am making enough for me and my husband to eat. So if you were just making this for yourself, I would try to half this ratio. But as you can see, I've added in 1 pound of ground turkey and then 1 pound of tofu. This is going to be, again, the breakfast for this week. Now I am working on the Cuban ajiaco stew. These meals are actually Cuban inspired. Now, I will say this lightly, they are loosely inspired. So it's not going to be exactly to how the Cubans would make it, but I did make this with my own little twist into it. So I actually will be posting these recipes on my blog within the week or two. Now I'm going back to my breakfast hash while my ajiaco stew veggies are sauteing. I did put quite a bit of seasonings into this hash. I'm not gonna lie, maybe just a little bit too much. Thankfully, the sweet potato and the mushroom and the eggs that's going to go into this really balance out the flavors, but I did add a little bit too much, so I will be adding the correct ratio of seasonings in the recipe once I put it up on my blog post. So just be sure to keep on the lookout on the community post tab. I'll be sure to make it public on once I have actually posted that recipe for all these meals, by the way, that I've made inside this meal prep. So I'm incorporating these seasonings into this mixture just really well. Of course, if you don't want to use tofu, you don't have to. And mine, I will say, I know I used quite a bit of seasoning, but look how beautiful this color looks with the ground turkey, y'all. I mean, it just looks so good. And honestly, I'm big on flavor, so it really wasn't that bad to me, but my husband said that it was just a little bit too much seasoning. So I'm gonna take his word for it. So I'm gonna make sure that I put the exact measurements in the recipe as I said prior. Here, I've actually separated meat because at first I was going to make his a little different and mine's a little different, but then I just decided I was going to add everything together. So, I mean, I'm adding everything in different containers, but I'm going to end up putting in one pan anyway. So next, I am actually cooking the sweet potatoes. I'm deciding to saute them in the same exact pan just because I don't feel like washing a whole ton of dishes. While these are softening up, I'm going back to the ajiaco stew and adding in my choice of meat, which is some chicken thighs. I make sure to take off as much skin and fat as possible. I seasoned it with a little bit of all-purpose Sazon seasoning, and then I'm adding in my water to begin boiling it, because we want this meat to be real tender, y'all. Making sure that my sweet potatoes do not burn. While those are still sauteing doing their thing, I'm hopping onto the mushrooms. Now, my baby girl was not having it when I was cutting these things, so I had to switch over the handle to my husband, and he finished up cutting up the mushrooms for me. I can't remember what time of day this was, but I just remember she was like, I'm ready for a nap. And I'm like, I'm almost done, baby. And she was like, yeah, you're about to be done like now. So I had to stop. So my husband is here cutting up the mushrooms for me. Once they were cut, he helped me put them inside the pan, and we're going to begin to saute them. As you can see, the mushrooms and the sweet potato are just overflowing this pan, y'all. So eventually I ended up switching to a bigger pan. But while it was still sauteing and I was just hoping that it was going to actually cook evenly, I went on to the lunch of the week, which is going to be sour orange chicken. Now, if you guys have never tried sour orange chicken before, you have to. It is so good. And if you guys have a 9-in-1 air fryer, be sure to put this setting on roasted, which you're about to see me do in a minute once it's done marinating. I went ahead and I marinated this overnight. Really, it was more than 12 hours. I would say I had this marinating for 24 hours. I'm not gonna lie. But the flavor was just so good. Then I'm returning back to my pan. As you can see here, I just came to terms that everything's not going to fit, and I put it inside a bigger pan to make sure all my vegetables are cooking thoroughly. Returning back to my ajiaco stew, just showing y'all that it's cooking, it's doing its thing. Once it starts boiling, you actually want to make sure you turn it down and start letting it simmer. So while that is still cooking, returning back to my breakfast hash, I'm stirring in the meat. As I mentioned before, I ended up combining everything anyway because me and my husband wanted to eat the same thing for this week. So I'm combining all the ingredients and I'm letting it soften a little bit more because I noticed the sweet potatoes weren't done. Once your chicken is actually cooked, for the most part, I would say make sure it's actually cooked all the way. Then use a slotted ladle spoon to make sure that you're taking out only the chicken and leaving the remains in there. Reason being is because once it begins to cool down a little bit more, you want to scrape off the fat on the top. So now to add in the rest of the vegetables to the ajiaco stew, I'm adding in yuca and butternut squash. I know that this recipe also calls for the white potato, the sweet potato. I think it's pronounced bolongo. I'm probably butchering that right now. I can't remember for the life of me, but I didn't have any on hand. I completely forgot to get it, so I ended up just using a regular sweet potato to add with the yuca and the butternut squash. Now, you don't have to do it the way that I'm doing it, but remember there is a root inside of yuca, and if you just cook it, that root ain't going nowhere. It's gonna be just as hard as it was when you first got it. So try to cut the root out. My mom actually told me that the best way to get the root out is to just soften it on the side, and then once it's done cooking, you're able to just pretty much rip the root right out in the middle. I didn't end up doing that because I literally forgot that she told me that. So I did it the hard way and I just cut it out. Added it to the stew and then went on to the butternut squash. Here I'm gonna dice it up into the same pieces. Now remember, this is a stew, so you don't want the chunks to be too big. I mean, unless you're about that. But I like my bites to be reasonable and actually, enjoyable. So I try to make these as bite-sized as possible. You can also add malanga to it. That's another root vegetable that is also added to the stew. But again, I didn't have that on hand. So when I said this is a loosely Cuban inspired ajiaco stew, I meant loosely inspired. And so I will be sure to put the recipe again on my blog, and I'll put it in the community post as soon as the recipe is up. But I really enjoyed this meal prep. I mean, it was so good. Stews are just the bulk of fall meals, if you know what I'm saying. So I'm actually thinking about making some chili too. Chili actually sounds really good. But as you can see here, I added in my sweet potatoes as well as the butternut squash. Now I'm adding in my crushed tomatoes. Now, if you have just regular tomato sauce, you could just use straight tomato sauce too. But I had crushed tomatoes already inside my pantry, so I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. So I just went ahead and I added that in there, mixing that very thoroughly. Now these are root vegetables. You want to make sure that these are cooked thoroughly. So I went ahead and I put the lid on top to let these do its thing. And last but not least, I could not forget about the plantains, y'all, okay? So when I was looking up different recipes and actually how to start up the ajiaco in the first place, they recommended one green plantain, an actual the skin is just straight green, okay? And then the other one is ripened. But because I did not have a white sweet potato, which is actually sweeter than a regular potato, I decided that I was just going to use 2 ripened bananas and then added in my corn. Now you can just do corn on a cob and cut it into 3 parts. But like I said, I wanted this stew to just be easier to eat, especially because I'm a mommy and most of the time I'm nursing while I'm eating. So I wanted to make sure I was actually able to eat it and enjoy my food without being fed by my husband. I want to enjoy my food. So I just put corn kernels instead, frozen corn kernels. Easy for prep too. Then last, you want to add in your lime just to give it that zang, okay? Always add in your limes and acidic foods like this towards the end because you don't want to burn out all that goodness. Adding my chicken to my air fryer, set it up on roast, and I kind of loosely played with the timing of this thing because it's such a small and compact machine to make chicken. You don't want to actually do 375 or 400 if the recipe or wherever you find it says that you should put it at that. You should always put it lower because it's going to cook it a lot faster and it's going to be a lot hotter. So while that is doing its thing, I went back to the ajiaco stew, put back in my chicken, and I'm just letting this cook even longer. And as you can see here, the root vegetables are starting to really just get all tender and making the soup really nice and thick. I mean, this was just so warm and cozy in the stomach, guys. I mean, just looking at this, doing this voiceover again, just makes me miss this stew so much. And I kind of did this out of order, but here I'm just showcasing how I dressed up my lunch. You can add black beans with this and some plantains, but I was in a rush this day, so I just put broccoli with a little bit of the sour orange juices, put that on the rice, and then had my drumstick there. Then here's me dressing up the dinner for me and my husband. I always give myself less rice than he is because, of course, I'm on a weight loss journey, but we don't omit food out here, okay? No restriction on food. And I gave us a helping serving of the hakiyako stew. Oh my goodness, this just looks so good. I can't wait for you guys to try it, especially like my loosely version of it. I would definitely say, though, the actual authentic way of making it is so much better. Then I added in about 1.5 cups of the breakfast hash right along with a fried egg. And of course, it's a meal prep video, so I gotta showcase myself meal prepping some extra servings of me on the side. This is later on in the week, so I'm only gonna be showing you guys the 2 days of me prepping up the breakfast hash on the side. But I had this all week. This fed me and my husband for the whole entire week, and it was phenomenal. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And as always, I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye bye.